Lieutenant Marcus Hale had been through rough landings before, but nothing like this. The survey shuttle Arden 3 shook so violently that the metal frame groaned like an animal in pain. Warning lights flashed red across the control panels as Marcus wrestled with the failing steering thrusters. "Come on. Hold together," he muttered, though he knew the shuttle could not hear him. Smoke curled from the vents. The screens flickered. Gravity slammed him into the seat as the ship spiraled downward. Outside the cracked cockpit window, the sky of the alien world burned bright orange. Massive trees reached upward like pillars holding the heavens in place. Lightning flashed across the strange clouds. The wind seemed alive, roaring and tearing at the shuttle's hull. The ship broke through the canopy with a sound like snapping bones. Branches smashed against the sides. The ground rushed up. Then impact, the world jolted. Metal screeched. Sparks exploded. Marcus's vision blurred until everything became a smear of green and gold. At last, the shuttle slid to a halt in a clearing of damp soil and broken vegetation. For a long moment, Marcus did not move. He listened to the crackle of small fires and the faint hiss of a damaged fuel line. Pain pulsed through his arms and legs, but he was alive. That was something. He unbuckled himself and crawled out of the seat. Every step sent sharp aches down his spine, but he pushed through it. He had survived the crash. Now he had to survive the planet. The emergency hatch jammed twice, but eventually he forced it open. Cool, humid air rushed in. He stepped outside and looked around in awe. The forest was unlike anything in human space. The trees were enormous, their trunks wide enough to hide starships. Their leaves shimmered with faint blue light, glowing softly in the shade. Floating pollen drifted like tiny lanterns. Strange bird-like creatures perched in high branches, watching him with glowing eyes. The scent of wildflowers and wet soil hung in the air. Marcus scanned the area with his handheld device. Atmosphere breathable. Level 3 pathogens. Forest density high. No immediate threats, he read aloud. But readings could be wrong and usually were. When dealing with unknown worlds, he retrieved the emergency pack from the shuttle, slung it over his shoulder, and pulled out the compact fire starter. The crash had torn away his weapon, and he knew nothing about the predators of this planet. Fire, at least, was universal. He gathered a small pile of fallen branches and dry leaves. With practiced movements, he scraped sparks onto the material. A flame caught, small and trembling at first. Marcus shielded it until it grew strong enough to live on its own. "Good," he murmured. "If I have fire, I have a chance." But Marcus did not realize he was being watched, hidden between the towering roots of a nearby tree. 3 figures observed him silently. Their skin was a warm bronze shade, marked with dark stripes that seemed to shimmer when they moved. Each one was tall, taller than any human, and powerful in build. With long braided hair decorated with feathers and metal beads, their eyes were sharp and bright, reflecting the firelight like polished amber. The tallest among them narrowed her eyes. She wore a curved blade strapped to her back and carried a spear carved from a bone longer than Marcus's arm. She spoke in a soft, melodic language, her voice like a low song. Strange one. Fragile one. Yet he calls the skyfire with his hands. Marcus heard nothing. He worked to stabilize the flame, feeding it more branches. Sweat dripped down his forehead. The humid air clung to him, and every breath made his ribs protest. He paused when a gentle vibration ran through the ground beneath him, like distant footsteps. He scanned the trees warily. Birds scattered. Leaves shivered. Something was moving closer. Many somethings. Marcus grabbed a metal rod from the wreckage and held it like a makeshift club. "All right. Come on then," he whispered. "Let's see what you are." He expected a beast. A predator. A large, hostile creature. What stepped out of the forest was not at all what he expected. From between the glowing trees emerged a group of tall, muscular alien women. They moved with the grace of trained hunters, silent yet powerful. Their armor was made of layered leather and bone, and their weapons, spears, curved blades, and slings looked handcrafted but expertly used. They formed a semicircle around him. Watching him with intense curiosity, Marcus froze. The tall leader stepped forward. Her eyes examined him from head to toe. She spoke again in that melodic language, her tone firm but not hostile. Marcus raised his hand slowly. I don't understand. I'm not here to fight. The leader tilted her head, listening to the strange sounds he made. To her, his voice must have sounded as alien as hers did to him. One of the younger warriors moved closer. Fascinated by the fire, she reached toward it. But the leader caught her wrist and spoke sharply. Marcus lifted a hand toward the flame, then pulled it back, shaking his head. Hot, he said clearly. Fire burns. He pointed to the girl's hand, then mimed being burned. The warriors exchanged surprised looks. The leader stepped nearer to the flame, studying it carefully. She seemed impressed by how Marcus had created it so quickly. Marcus slowly crouched, and used a stick to adjust the burning branches. He moved slowly, deliberately, to show he wasn't doing anything dangerous. The warriors murmured among themselves. The leader clicked her tongue, and the rhythmic sounds carried a tone Marcus instinctively understood as authority. She pointed at Marcus, then at the crash-landed shuttle behind him. Marcus nodded. My ship, he said. Then he mimed the ship falling from the sky and crashing, complete with a small exploding gesture. At the end, the women reacted with surprise and interest. Marcus felt a small wave of relief. They weren't attacking him. They didn't seem frightened or aggressive. If anything, they seemed curious. He noticed how their armor was tough but primitive, their metal tools limited in shape. They had the strength and discipline of a trained warrior society, yet their technology level was far behind humanity's. Their spears were well made, but their blades were stone, not steel. Their clothing was reinforced leather, not synthetic polymer. They lived by skill, not machines, and Marcus, without realizing it, had already shown them something new: simplicity and control of human firecraft. The leader approached him directly now. She stood nearly a head taller than him, her stance confident but not threatening. With one hand, she pointed at him. With the other, she made a sweeping gesture that indicated the forest around them. Then she asked something, one soft, melodic phrase. Marcus didn't understand the words, but he understood the meaning well enough. Who are you? He took a breath. Marcus Hale, he said, touching his chest. Marcus. The leader watched him closely. Then she tapped her own chest. Soraka, she said. Marcus repeated it carefully. Say. Raka, she nodded once, satisfied. Introductions complete. The tension eased slightly. The warriors lowered their weapons, though they still eyed him with caution. Soraka spoke again, and two of the women approached Marcus's shuttle. Examining it from a distance, fascinated by the strange metal structure, Marcus stepped between them and the wreck. No, dangerous, he warned. He pointed at the leaking fuel line, then mimed an explosion with his hands. The women jumped back, surprised. Soraka made a low sound, half amusement and half respect. She gestured to Marcus, then pointed toward the forest path behind her. She wanted him to follow them. Marcus hesitated. He had no idea where they were taking him, but staying beside a leaking shuttle wasn't safe either. And he was injured, unarmed, and alone. These warriors, this tribe, might be his only chance of survival. He picked up his emergency pack and nodded. All right, I'll come. Soraka gave a short, approving sound. She turned and led the way into the glowing forest. Her tribe moving like shadows among the trees. Marcus followed, glancing back once at the wreck of his shuttle and the small fire still burning beside it. He did not know it yet, but stepping onto that forest path would change not just his future, but the entire fate of the tribe that found him. For now, though, he simply walked alone, injured, and surrounded by strangers, hoping he had made the right choice. Marcus followed the Valrani warriors deeper into the glowing forest, feeling every step in his injured ribs. The towering trees curved overhead like enormous arches, blocking most of the sky. Blue pollen drifted through the air, glowing like tiny floating stars. Strange animal cries echoed far away, mixing with the rustling of leaves. The tribe moved with natural grace. Their feet barely made a sound on the soft forest floor. Marcus walked clumsily in comparison, his human boots crunching sticks and dead leaves with every step. The women sometimes glanced back at him, their expressions curious but unreadable. Soraka, the tribe's leader, walked at the front. Her long braids swung gently behind her, decorated with small metal beads that clicked together softly as she moved. She carried her spear as if it weighed nothing, though it was nearly as tall as Marcus. After nearly an hour of traveling, they reached a cluster of wide roots, forming a natural wall. Soraka raised her hand, signaling the group to stop. She crouched, pressing her ear to the ground. The other warriors did the same. Marcus froze, uncertain. A faint vibration moved through the soil, slow, heavy, and rhythmic, not like the earlier tremors he had felt. This was deeper, larger. Soraka whispered something to her warriors. They positioned themselves defensively, spears angled outward. Marcus watched, confused and suddenly nervous. Then, from beyond the trees, came a distant roar. Not human, not animal. Something primal and powerful. Marcus felt his heart jump. "What is that?" The Valrani did not answer. Instead, they motioned for silence and continued moving, speeding up their pace. Marcus forced his legs to keep up, breathing hard. Soon, they reached a steep hill covered in thick vines. Soraka pushed aside the foliage, revealing a hidden path that wound upward. They climbed quickly, and Marcus struggled after them, slipping twice, but catching himself each time. At the top of the hill, the forest opened into a plateau overlooking a large valley. And there, in the center of the valley, stood the Valrani village. Marcus stared in amazement. Circular huts, made of wood, bone, and hardened clay, formed a wide settlement. Each structure was decorated with colorful feathers, glowing plants, and chiseled stone patterns. Tall watchtowers made from hollowed tree trunks surrounded the village. Smoke rose from several cooking fires. Children played near the center, and warriors patrolled along the perimeter. The entire village seemed alive. Woven seamlessly into the natural forest, Soraka spoke a command, and the group descended toward the entrance. 2 guards stood at the gate, their armor a bit heavier than the others. They stiffened when they saw Marcus, but relaxed when Soraka gave a short, authoritative nod. The villagers paused their activities as Marcus entered. Dozens of eyes watched him, some curious, some wary, some amazed. Mothers gathered their children close. Young warriors inspected him with interest, whispering to one another. Marcus tried to stand straight despite his pain. He realized he was probably the first human they had ever seen. The thought made the moment both terrifying and strangely important. Soraka led him to a large structure near the center of the village. Its entrance was decorated with hanging bones carved with symbols. Inside, a fire pit glowed softly, casting warm light across the circular room. 2 older women sat near the fire. Their hair was gray, braided with beads of stone instead of metal. They wore layered robes rather than armor. Their eyes were sharp and observant. Soraka bowed her head slightly and spoke in her melodic language, explaining what had happened, the crash, the fire, Marcus's strange skills. The elders listened carefully. Marcus watched their expressions, trying to guess their thoughts. He stood still, hands lowered, making sure he appeared non-threatening. One of the elders rose and approached him. She studied his face, his clothes, his posture. Then she gently touched his shoulder, as if checking whether he was real. Marcus offered a small smile. "Hello," he said quietly. The elder repeated the sound awkwardly. "Hello." Marcus nodded encouragingly. "Yes, hello." Soraka and the other elder exchanged surprised glances. The elder touched her chest. "Lamara," she said. "Lamara," Marcus repeated politely. The elder's expression softened. With introductions done, Soraka motioned for Marcus to follow her again. She brought him to a small hut near the village edge. It looked freshly cleaned, with soft woven mats covering the floor. She pointed inside. "Marcus," she said, then tapped the hut. He understood a place for him to rest. "Thank you," he said sincerely. I appreciate it. Soraka didn't understand the words, but she recognized the tone. She gave a small nod, then turned to leave. Before she walked away, Marcus touched his own chest gently and winced. Soraka paused, understanding the meaning. She gestured for him to sit. Then she called out to a young woman nearby. The young warrior ran off and returned a minute later with a bowl of a thick, greenish salve. Soraka dipped her fingers in the ointment and pointed at Marcus's ribs. Marcus hesitated. It's all right. I can do it. But Soraka shook her head firmly. She carefully lifted the edge of his shirt, revealing bruises spreading across his side. Her expression grew serious. She applied the salve gently. Her movements surprisingly soft for someone so strong. The ointment felt cool at first, then warm. The pain dulled almost instantly. Marcus sighed with relief. That helps. Thank you. Soraka glanced into his eyes for a moment. Then she nodded once and stepped back. The young warrior who had brought the salve spoke to Soraka, pointing excitedly at the metal fire starter hanging from Marcus's belt. Soraka nodded, then looked at Marcus, pointing to the object with clear curiosity. Marcus understood. They wanted to see how it worked. He reached into his pack, pulled out the fire starter, and kneeled outside the hut. Soraka and the young warrior crouched beside him. Watching closely, Marcus gathered a small pile of dry leaves and scraped sparks onto them. The leaves smoked, then ignited. The young warrior gasped in excitement. She reached toward the flame again, but Soraka corrected her with a soft, scolding click of the tongue. Marcus smiled and demonstrated again, this time letting the sparks land on a piece of cloth. He explained in simple words, even though they couldn't understand. Metal, strike, spark, fire. Soraka repeated the motions slowly, trying to mimic him. Her first attempt failed. Her second produced a weak spark. On the third try, a small flame caught. Her eyes widened with amazement. Marcus felt a warm sense of pride. Teaching these people, sharing knowledge, felt right. Not like superiority, but like cooperation. He struck more sparks, showing them different ways to control the fire. He made a tiny torch using a stick and dried sap from a nearby tree. The Valrani women watched, fascinated. Other villagers soon gathered around, drawn by the smell of smoke and the excitement. Children sat cross-legged, eyes shining. Warriors leaned in, eager to learn. Marcus realized something important then. These people had skill, discipline, and intelligence. They simply lacked access to certain techniques. If he shared small pieces of human knowledge, they could adapt quickly. He felt a strange sense of responsibility and opportunity as the sun set behind the trees. Casting long shadows across the village, Soraka stood and made a short speech to the gathered crowd. Though Marcus could not understand the words, he caught the meaning from the tone. Hope, curiosity, change. For the first time since the crash, Marcus felt something other than fear or exhaustion. He felt welcome. He settled into the small hut as night fell. Soft, glowing plants outside lit the darkness with gentle blue light. The distant forest hummed with the sounds of alien wildlife. Marcus lay down on the woven mat, his body still aching, but his mind racing. He hadn't just survived today. He had made contact. He had begun a connection that could reshape the future of the tribe. And maybe his own future too, but neither he nor the Valrani knew that danger was already stirring in the depths of the forest. A threat older than the tribe, a threat that had heard the crash, a threat that was coming closer. For now, though, the village slept peacefully, and Marcus slept with them, no longer a stranger. But the first spark in the dark of a new beginning. Marcus woke to the sound of distant drums. For a moment he didn't know where he was. The soft woven mat, the wooden walls, the glowing blue plants outside, none of it felt familiar. Then memory returned in a rush. The crash, the tribe, Soraka, the healing salve. He pushed himself up, stretching carefully. His ribs still hurt, but the pain was more like a dull ache now, instead of a stabbing knife. Whatever medicine the Valrani used worked extremely well. The drums sounded again, slow, steady, serious. Marcus stepped outside into the cool morning air. The village was alive with activity. Warriors were gathering near the central fire pit, checking their weapons, tightening their armor. The elders spoke quickly among themselves, their expressions tense. Something was wrong. Soraka noticed Marcus and walked toward him, her posture stiff and alert. She carried her spear in one hand and a long-bone dagger at her waist. Her braided hair had been tied back tightly, ready for movement. Marcus frowned. "What's happening?" She responded in her own language, making sharp gestures toward the forest. Marcus didn't understand the words, but he recognized the fear behind them. He followed her gaze to the distant trees. A faint dust cloud rose above the canopy, moving slowly like a creeping fog. The forest birds were strangely silent. Even the wind felt heavy. Soraka knelt and pressed her palm to the ground. Marcus did the same. He felt it, the slight, steady vibration under the soil. Not random. Not natural. A marching rhythm. He straightened quickly. "Something is coming," Soraka nodded. The villagers began forming defensive circles. Older children were hurried into the safety huts. Elders marked the ground with chalk lines that looked like ritual symbols. Warriors sharpened their spears with stone tools, their faces set in grim determination. A young warrior named Rhinai approached Marcus. She had been one of the first to watch him make fire the day before. Now, her eyes were wide with worry. She pointed toward the forest and made a clawing gesture with her hand. Marcus shook his head. "I don't understand," Renee repeated the gesture, adding a low rumbling growl. She crouched, mimicking something moving underground. Marcus blinked. Underground? Soraka stepped closer and drew a quick symbol in the dirt, a circle with jagged lines around it. Then she stabbed her spear into the center of the circle and dragged it outward, breaking the symbol apart. A threat to the village. Marcus looked around. Everyone here had lived on this world far longer than he had. If they were afraid, he needed to take it seriously. He turned and hurried to his crashed shuttle. Soraka and Rhinai followed, worried but curious. The wreck still lay half-buried in vines and dirt. The fire he had made earlier was long gone, leaving only ashes. Marcus climbed inside and opened the emergency storage locker. Most of the equipment was ruined from the crash, but he salvaged 3 useful items: a compact metal cutting tool, a broken but partly functional scanner, a reinforced metal rod from the ship frame. He also grabbed a small toolkit he had barely touched since landing. When he emerged, Soraka was waiting with a questioning expression. Marcus held up the metal rod and tapped it against a piece of stone. The clean metallic sound echoed. "Stronger," he said. "Better than bone." He pointed at their spears, then at the rod. Soraka's eyes widened slightly. She understood. Marcus knelt beside a nearby rock. With the cutting tool, he shaved off thin strips of metal from the rod, heating them with a spark device until they glowed faintly. The Valrani watched in amazement. As he hammered a rough edge into one strip using a stone, it wasn't real steel. The materials were limited, but it was stronger than anything the tribe currently used. He held the new metal edged out to Soraka. She tested it with her thumb, eyes widening at how sharp it was. A look of respect crossed her face. Rhinai clapped excitedly and ran to gather more spears. Marcus set to work. He heated metal strips in a small fire. He hammered them flat, using stone blocks. He attached them to spearheads, using leather straps soaked in sap to bind the metal tightly soon. The Valrani had their first fire-forged weapons, but there was no time to admire them. The ground trembled more violently now. Birds exploded from treetops, fleeing in every direction. Rhinai shouted and pointed. Dark shapes moved between the trees, dozens of them, crawling low to the ground. Marcus squinted, trying to see clearly. At first he thought they were animals, but as the shapes drew closer, he saw the truth. Creatures with thick armored plates covering their bodies. Their limbs were short but powerful. Their jaws were filled with jagged teeth. Their eyes glowed a dull red, like embers buried in ash. Some burrowed through the soil, creating shifting mounds of earth. Others crawled across the surface with unsettling speed. Soraka spoke a single word. her voice tense and steady. Iron Maw. Marcus felt a chill run through him. The creatures swarmed toward the village perimeter. The ground shook with their weight. Warriors rushed to defensive positions, forming tight spear walls. Soraka ran forward, shouting orders. Renee took position beside her, gripping her newly reinforced spear. Marcus swallowed hard. He had no armor. He had only a metal rod and a handful of tools. But he couldn't hide. These people had taken him in, healed him, welcomed him. He would not let them fight alone. He joined Soraka at the front, just as the first Iron Maw creature lunged from beneath the soil. It exploded upward in a spray of dirt, jaws snapping. Marcus barely dodged aside. Soraka thrust her spear down, the new metal tip piercing the creature's armored hide. It shrieked, a high, terrible sound, then collapsed. More burst from the ground. Rhinai stabbed one in the face, driving it back. Another creature knocked two warriors aside with its heavy body, but the metal-tipped spears held better than the old bone ones. Still, the Iron Maw were relentless. They kept coming, their bodies scraping and clattering like living machines. Marcus saw one creature preparing to break the defensive line. Without thinking, he grabbed a burning branch from a fire pit and thrust it toward the monster's face. The creature recoiled, hissing fire. It feared fire. Marcus shouted, pointing to the flames. Fire. Use fire. The Valrani didn't know the words, but they understood the meaning. Warriors grabbed torches and used them alongside their spears, forcing the Iron Maw back, but still the creatures pressed forward. Soraka fought fiercely, but a large Iron Maw slammed into her, knocking her to the ground. Its jaws snapped inches from her face. Marcus reacted instantly. He swung the metal rod with all his strength, striking the creature on the head. The impact rang like hitting metal armor, but the blow stunned the beast long enough for Soraka to roll aside and stab it through the neck. She looked at Marcus with surprise and gratitude, but the battle was far from over. More Iron Maw crawled from burrows across the battlefield. Some were larger, with heavier plating. They moved with frightening coordination, as if following a shared instinct. The village walls shook under their assault. Marcus noticed something. The creatures avoided open flames, but they did not avoid smoke. He grabbed dry leaves and threw them into a fire pit, creating a thick cloud of smoke. The Iron Maw near him retreated, confused. He shouted and waved his arms. Smoke. Use more smoke. Warriors copied him, throwing bundles of dry foliage into the fires, creating a choking haze. The Iron Maw began to hesitate, their movements less coordinated. A turning point, Soraka saw the effect and shouted orders. Warriors lit more torches and threw burning branches into the creature's path. The battlefield shifted as the Iron Maw were forced back. But just as victory seemed close, a massive Iron Maw broke through the trees, twice the size of the others. Its armor thicker and darker. Soraka's expression hardened. This was the leader. The creature roared and the ground trembled. Marcus looked at Soraka. She looked at him. They both knew this fight was different, and it was far from over. The giant Iron Maw stepped out of the forest like a walking nightmare. Its massive body was covered in thick, dark armor that looked almost like metal. Deep cracks glowed faintly with red heat, as if fire lived inside its strange body. When it roared, the sound shook the air and sent several warriors stumbling back. Marcus felt the vibration in his bones. Soraka raised, her spear high, and gave a sharp battle cry. The Valrani warriors answered with their own shouts, though fear trembled beneath their voices. The Iron Maw leader smashed its clawed legs into the ground. The soil cracked. Smaller Iron Maw crawlers responded instantly. Surging toward the village again, Marcus tightened his grip on the metal rod. His whole body shook, but he refused to step back. The Valrani had welcomed him. He owed them everything now. The battle begins. The smaller Iron Maw rushed forward first. Soraka directed her warriors into a tight formation, using their newly reinforced spears to create a wall of sharp points. The creature slammed into the line, snapping and hissing, but the metal tips pierced their armor better than before. Marcus saw Rhinai fighting nearby. Her face streaked with dirt and sweat. She ducked under a creature's swipe and thrust her spear into its side. Another warrior drove a burning torch into the face of an iron maw, forcing it back with a loud shriek. But then the giant iron maw charged. It plowed through trees like they were dry sticks. Its armored body struck one of the village walls and shattered the wooden beams. Splinters flew everywhere. Marcus grabbed Soraka's arm. "We need something stronger than spears. We need traps." Soraka didn't understand all the words, but she understood the urgency. She nodded sharply. Marcus pointed to the burning pits and the piles of sapwood. "Fire, smoke, we make them go where we want." Soraka shouted orders. Warriors ran to gather more wood, while others prepared torches. Marcus directed them to place burning branches along a curved line, forming a semicircle. The thick smoke drifted low across the battlefield. Smaller iron maw crawled into it, confused and stumbling, but the giant iron maw did not stop. It lowered its head and charged straight through the smoke line, determined to reach the village. Marcus's heart hammered. "It's going to break everything." Soraka stepped forward, spear ready, her expression fierce and unafraid. But even she knew her weapon alone could not stop something this huge. Human tactics. Valrani strength. Marcus forced his mind to focus. He remembered his military training, the drills, the strategies, the battlefield lessons. "Don't fight it head on," he whispered. "Make it turn. Slow it down. Trap it." He ran toward a fallen tree trunk, one that had snapped during the crash days before. It was thick, heavy, and half-burned, but still strong enough to be useful. "Help," he shouted, waving his arms. Rhinai and two warriors rushed to him. Marcus pointed at the trunk, then pointed at the approaching monster. Together they rolled the heavy wood toward the path. The giant iron maw saw them and roared. It charged again. "Move." Marcus yelled. The warriors leaped aside as the creature smashed into the trunk. The heavy wood slowed it for a moment, just enough for Marcus to shout a new command. "Push the fire pits. Block its path." Valrani warriors grabbed long branches and rolled burning fireballs toward the monster. Flames licked at the ground. The iron maw leader hesitated, its glowing eyes narrowing. It hated the fire. Marcus saw his chance. Soraka now. Soraka sprinted forward, her spear held low. Two warriors followed her, spreading out to flank the creature. Together they struck at its legs, the joints where the armor was thinnest. The giant beast roared in pain, shaking violently. Its tail swept across the ground. Knocking two warriors off their feet, Marcus rushed toward them, grabbing one and pulling her away before the monster crushed her. His ribs screamed with pain, but he gritted his teeth and kept going. The battle was turning, but not enough. The Iron Maw leader was wounded, angry, and still incredibly strong. Marcus looked at the burning pits. Then at the leaking fuel line from his crashed shuttle, an idea sparked. A dangerous one. The fire. Trapped Marcus sprinted toward the shuttle wreck. Soraka shouted after him. But he waved her off. There was no time to explain. He reached the wreck and tore open the damaged fuel panel. The smell of raw fuel hit him immediately. He coughed and turned his face away, covering his mouth. "This is stupid," he told himself. Very stupid. But he had no choice. He dragged the cracked fuel container out and began pouring a line of it across the battlefield, creating a path that looped in a wide circle around the Iron Maw leader. The ground became wet and shiny with the flammable liquid. Renee saw what he was doing and gasped. She pointed at the fuel and shouted something urgent in Valrani language. Marcus nodded. Yes, fire. Understanding flashed in her eyes. She called two warriors to help spread the fuel faster. Soraka saw the circle forming and realized the plan. She shouted for the warriors to clear the area. The giant Iron Maw noticed the retreating warriors and charged again. But its movements had slowed due to the wounds. It lumbered into the center of the circle of fuel. Marcus grabbed a burning torch from a fallen warrior and held it high. Soraka locked eyes with him and nodded once, the kind of nod shared only between warriors who trusted each other completely. Marcus. Through the torch thought the fuel ignited instantly. A ring of fire roared to life around the Iron Maw leader. Flames leaped high, forming a blazing wall. The creature shrieked and tried to break through, but every direction was blocked. It threw itself at the fire again and again, but the heat was too intense. The flames tightened as the fuel burned inward, trapping the creature in a shrinking circle. Finally, with one last scream of rage, the giant Iron Maw collapsed in the burning ring. The ground stopped shaking. The battlefield fell silent. After the battle, the surviving Iron Maw crawlers fled back into the forest. Disappearing into the shadows they came from, the village warriors watched them go, clutching their weapons with trembling hands. Marcus collapsed to one knee, gasping, his vision blurred. His ribs ached terribly. Rainai ran to him, helping him stand. Several villagers rushed forward, cheering breathlessly. Though he couldn't understand their words, he understood their faces' gratitude. Relief, admiration. Soraka approached slowly. Her usually stern expression had softened. She placed her hand on Marcus's shoulder and spoke a short, strong phrase. Marcus, steelbearer. The villagers repeated the title with pride. Marcus didn't know their exact meaning, but he felt the weight of honor in the sound. He had fought beside them, saved them, shared his knowledge, and now, for the first time, he wasn't just a visitor, he was one of them. But as the smoke cleared and the wounded were carried back to the huts, Marcus felt a new fear rise inside him. The Iron Maw had come early, they had attacked with more numbers than usual. Something was changing on this world. Something dangerous, and Marcus knew this was only the beginning. The morning after the great battle was strangely quiet. Soft sunlight slipped through the broken trees, touching the village with a warm glow. Smoke still rose from the burned circle where the giant Iron Maw had fallen. The villagers worked to repair damaged walls, gather the wounded, and clean the battlefield. Marcus watched them, feeling both pride and worry. His body ached everywhere. His ribs hurt with every breath, but his mind kept returning to one heavy thought. Why did the Iron Maw attack with so many? Soraka approached him, her steps slow but strong. She carried her spear on her back, though her arm was wrapped in bandages. You fought with heart, she said in her rough accent. She spoke slowly, trying to match Marcus's language. Valrani, honor you. Marcus nodded. But something is wrong. They attacked too early, Soraka agreed. Yes, Iron Maw grow bold. Something pushed them. Marcus looked toward the distant mountains, dark and quiet. He felt trouble hiding there, like a storm waiting to break. We need to find out what changed, he said, or they will come again, bigger, stronger.
Ow.
Soraka placed a hand on his shoulder. Then we go. A dangerous journey. By midday, Marcus, Soraka, Rainai, and a small group of warriors prepared to leave the village. They carried water bags, spears, and a few metal tools Marcus crafted from melted scraps of his shuttle. The young warriors looked nervous, but they trusted Soraka completely. And they trusted Marcus, the steelbearer, the outsider, who had brought fire and metal to their hands. As they walked into the forest, the air grew colder. Strange bird calls sounded from above. The ground became rough, covered in roots and strange purple moss that glowed faintly in the shade. Rainai walked beside Marcus, pointing to footprints in the mud. Iron Maw, she said softly. Many. Marcus crouched and studied the tracks. They're moving toward the mountains. Soraka frowned. Their nest? Marcus shook his head. Not this many. Something else. The group continued deeper into the forest until the trees thinned and rocky slopes rose ahead. The air smelled of smoke, but not the kind from a campfire. It was sharper, like burning metal. Do you hear that? Marcus whispered. A deep rumbling echoed from somewhere ahead. The warriors lowered their spears, their eyes wide. They followed the sound carefully, moving between stones and tall grasses, until they reached a cliff overlooking a wide valley. What they saw made Marcus freeze. The Iron Maw's secret below them. The valley churned with movement. Hundreds of iron maw crawlers scuttled across the ground. But the creatures weren't attacking or hunting. They were building. Metal fragments, strange glowing stones, and pieces of something that looked like shipwreckage were piled in the center of the valley. At the heart of it all stood a massive, half-buried machine. Its dark surface pulsed with red light. Marcus felt his stomach drop. This wasn't made by nature. Soraka narrowed her eyes. What is it? A crashed machine, Marcus whispered. Not from my ship, but from somewhere else. One of the iron maw crawlers carried part of the machine toward a smaller group, where a larger iron maw, even bigger than the one they fought, placed the piece into a glowing socket. The machine responded with a loud hum, and energy shot through the valley floor. Rhinai stepped back in fear. They grow stronger. Marcus breathed slowly. His mind raced. This machine, it's changing them. Soraka glared at the valley. Then we break it. Marcus stared at her. There are too many. We need a plan. Plan? Soraka crossed her arms. You have many plans. Marcus almost smiled. This one will need all of us. The plan of fire and metal. Marcus studied the valley for a long time. Then he pointed to a series of old stone ridges above the iron maw nest. If we break those rocks, they'll fall down and crush the machine. Soraka nodded. Good plan. I frowned. Iron Mawguard Valley. They see us. Marcus touched the metal rod at his belt. I'll distract them. No, Soraka said immediately. You are needed. You bring steel. You bring fire. We protect you. Marcus shook his head. This is my idea. I'm the only one who knows how to draw their attention without getting caught. Rhinai looked worried. Marcus. He smiled softly. Trust me. The warriors prepared for ours, gathering vines, placing stones, and sharpening spears. Marcus showed them how to position fire traps, simple devices made from SAP wood, flint stones, and metal scraps. Soraka studied each trap, memorizing the steps. As night fell, the valley glowed with the iron maw's strange red light. The machine pulsed stronger now. The creatures moved around it like insects chasing heat. It was time. Into the valley Marcus crept down the cliff, staying low. He placed fire traps around the valley edges, lighting only the faintest spark inside each one. He didn't dare light them fully yet, at the bottom. He stepped out into the open. The nearest iron maw turned toward him. Its glowing eyes widened. It hissed loudly, calling to the others. Marcus raised his metal rod and banged it against a rock. The sharp clang echoed across the valley. Come on, he whispered. Come get me. The creatures rushed toward him. Marcus turned and ran. He sprinted across the valley floor, dodging between rocks and roots. The iron maw followed in a huge wave of claws and armor. Marcus's heart pounded painfully in his chest. But he kept going. As he reached the cliff wall, he shouted a single word. Now. The fall of the machine high above, Soraka and the warriors slammed their spears into the first ridge. The rocks groaned, cracked, and then collapsed with a thunderous roar. Boulders tumbled down. Marcus dove behind a fallen tree, just as the first wave of rocks smashed into the valley floor. Iron maw screamed and scattered, crushed or buried under the avalanche. But the machine remained untouched. Again, Soraka roared. The warriors struck the second ridge. More stones fell, landing closer to the machine, but still not enough. Marcus pulled himself up, coughing. His side burned with pain. Not enough, he whispered. He looked at the fire traps, then at the leaking energy lines running from the machine. A dangerous idea formed in his mind. He ran to the nearest fire trap and kicked it hard. It burst into flames. The fire spread along the sapwood line, racing toward the energy cable. Marcus. What you do? Soraka shouted from above. Ending this. The fire touched the cable. A violent burst of red energy exploded outward, shaking the ground. The machine crackled and sparked wildly. The large iron maw leader roared in rage and charged Marcus. Marcus grabbed his metal rod and swung with everything he had. Sparks flew. The creature barely slowed. Just as it reached him, the final ridge broke. A massive wall of stone crashed down, smashing into the machine and burying the Iron Maw leader beneath. Tons of rock, the machine screamed like a dying beast. Then the valley fell silent. A new dawn, when the dust settled. Soraka and the warriors rushed down to Marcus. Rhinai reached him first, tears in her eyes. "You live," she said, touching his shoulder. Marcus gave a weak smile. "Barely." Soraka looked at the broken valley, the crushed machine, and the fallen Iron Maw. "It is done. You saved all tribes, not just ours." Marcus shook his head. "We all saved them. Together." The warriors gathered around him, raising their spears high. The red light from the broken machine faded, replaced by the soft silver of the rising moon. Marcus looked at the stars above. His home was somewhere out there, but he no longer felt lost. He had a purpose here. He had people who trusted him. He had a legacy to build. Soraka stepped forward and spoke with deep pride. "Marcus, steelbearer, you are Valrani now." The warriors repeated the word, their voices strong and united. Marcus felt warmth in his chest. Not from fire, not from metal, from belonging. And so the legend began, the human who met a tribe of alien women, and together carried a legacy of fire and steel into a new future.